Life Lessons is an interview series of Thoughtworks, which allows us to learn from the experience and perspectives of captivating and inspiring personalities who are committed to break new grounds. Welcome to Thoughtworks Life Lessons.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone.
My first question to you is, what made you become an author, a women's circle facilitator, podcaster, and speaker, starting as a marketing manager?
Yeah. Well, it definitely wasn't my plan. So I got my MBA, my master's degree in business, right after university in 2008, when the economy, particularly here in the States, was like bad. And I was becoming aware of the way the world was shifting, particularly with climate change and with the ways that you probably hear my daughter in the background. These are the realities of working from home. Oh no, okay. She's just giggling on the other side of the wall. Yeah, I could tell that the world was shifting. So I got a job in the San Francisco tech industry, which was booming, and in marketing. But I always had in my mind that like this may not last and this may not feed me in the way that because I always had a future mind, like thinking about like, what is the world, what is society, what is family, what is community going to look like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. I was fortunate enough to be in a company that was acquired. So I had a financial cushion that was available to me, which I think is really important to say, that we are transparent about money because we live in a culture that doesn't share. And so a lot of people are like, how do you do it financially? So I had a cushion from a company acquiring us, and then I could cash in my shares. And it was enough to for my partner and I to just live on one salary, his salary, and I started a blog. So I blogged about things I cared about, things I was making, and that is how I started to create a community online. And it took many, many, many iterations, but I knew that I didn't even know what I wanted to create, but I knew I wanted to create something that fed me and fed the community that in my marketing work, I just didn't feel like I was really making an impact. So over many years, I went through deep transformation of my own self. And fast forward, I figured out I liked talking. So I started a podcast. And from a strategic mindset, I knew that podcasting was becoming more popular because people could do things while listening. Also, I wanted to tell stories because I was realizing that human beings integrate information more effectively from storytelling. I'm just realizing that now in retrospect. And one thing led to another. I just followed the breadcrumbs. And so, yeah, I ended up creating this podcast that had a huge movement. I created an Instagram account that kept growing. And then I was able to get a book deal where I could share what I'm passionate about, which is this idea of belonging in this modern life, living in what is known as the age of loneliness, and looking to the way our ancestors lived, not to live like them, but to take what they knew to be true in this fast-paced modern time and integrate it. So I wrote the book, and here I am today now, talking to all of you, just like literally following the next thing that presents itself to me.
Well, I think I have to correct my question and bring in a writer, because that was the first thing that you did after and then doing the podcasting and so on. So yeah, we can deep dive into your content. A study published in 2020 in Frontier in Psychology found that 10 minutes of sitting or walking in natural settings significantly and positively impacted psychological and physiological markers, such as decreased anxiety scores, decreased heart rate, blood pressure, and cortisol level. You have a practice in your book that I want to cite and ritual, and that is called Wander Purposefully. You write, Carve out some time in your schedule to go out in nature without any technology, to re-engage a sense of awe and comfort with the natural world. As you go out, hold the intention of widening your lens and inviting in that which you wouldn't normally notice. So this practice and others to connect to nature, how can we integrate that into our daily lives, especially living in the city?
Yes. Yes. Well, so the first thing I want to say is we as human beings at one point lived with a sense of familiarity and comfort and ease in the living world. This term nature, I use the term nature, but nature is a colonial term in the sense that it is separate from us. Like we go out into nature, not in the way that, and what I mean by that is that we don't, as if we don't come from that, as if we didn't once live in that and, you know, just feel a total comfort and ease. But of course, here we are in our temperature controlled, most of us, homes with plumbing. And I'm so grateful. You and I are talking on the internet. It's wonderful. And there are ways in which our bodies, our nervous systems, our emotional states are not designed for four walls and computer screens. We all know this to be true, right? Because I don't know about you, but when I was born, I didn't have a screen in front of my face in the 1980s. Different now. My daughter has screens in her face as she's two, but there's a way for us to remember, right? So the first thing I want to say is for us to remember that it is not natural, as in it doesn't nourish and serve us to always be sitting and always being in front of screens inside. There's a study I read for the book, at least in the United States, I'm sure it's pretty similar in Europe, that we spend 90% of our time indoors. Now that's a pretty shocking stat, 90%. And then you think about your life and you're like, yeah, that's pretty much accurate. Wow. For most of us, getting some fresh air, going on a walk, standing and looking at a tree feels good, you know, walking through a park. So even if you live in a city, the beauty of city is these natural spaces that are woven in. And what I try to remember with cities is even under the concrete, there is earth, there's water moving, there are bones decomposing, there is soil that is alive, there are critters moving, there is life, there are mushrooms making like new soil all underneath the surface. Even in Paris, in New York City, in Berlin, that is true. And so this is all like, okay, this is good information, but here I am. How do I make it work? Well, it's habit creation. It doesn't come easily. Habit creation, and it takes consistent remembering or reminding of yourself to remember. It's like, even though walking outside would feel really good, it's going to be hard to step away. It's going to be hard to step away. So there are certain like hacks that we can do. One is setting an alarm. There are even these apps that like tell you to step up. Maybe it's even in your, I know that some like corporations have like take a break reminders that they work into their software. I just like set a reminder on my phone or my Apple Watch to be like, stand up, go outside, like take 3 breaths. And it does wonders. It actually clears your brain so that you are more creative. Your consideration of your health and your community is more present. Like it just makes you a more productive and a happier human that is taking care of themselves. And that's what we need. We need all of you to take care of yourselves.
Yeah. I think next thing I do will set up a Zoom meeting in my calendar that is saying, go out to nature, 50 minutes, just short.
Yes.
Yeah.
Put it in your calendar. Yeah, we all live by our calendars. I do too, you know, and so you have to make the space. And that can feel like a very radical, rebellious act, right? Because so many of us are like at the mercy of the invites. But remember, like you are the boss of your life. It's such like a cliche term, but you are the boss of your life. And you can create space. And if someone says, are you available at 1? You can say, no, I'm not. And you don't have to say why. And the reason why is you're caring for yourself in whatever way you need.
Right. And on this topic, actually, you have this bedtime affirmations I read, and I want to know more about that. Study, again, published in 2022 in Brain, Immunity, Behavior, and Health, found actually that the leading health consequence of the pandemic is the prevalence of sleep-related issues.
Yeah.
So my question is, what made you create this in the first place?
Yeah. So, wow, I did not know about that study, and it makes so much sense. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're working from home now, and there's no real delineation between personal and there is, but it's hard. You have to create it. And I know that some of us have to work in our bedrooms, like like next to the bed is the desk. And so, or even you're sitting in bed, right? And so there's that. So the first thing I always want to say is, like, if you can make your bedroom a temple, if you can, for sleep and rest, because that's so important. I'd say, okay, so my partner still works in tech here in San Francisco, a very fast-paced company, actually a robotics company. So I'm always about the human and he's always about the robot. But he developed pretty intense insomnia in the last 2 years. Yeah. We also had a child. So there's just a lot of stress, and everyone's got their own version of that. So when I was writing the book, I was talking to him about, what is it when you lay down to go to sleep that makes it so hard to fall asleep? Or he wakes up and he's like, I'm just thinking about everything I have to do, everything I didn't get done. And so that is the culture, right? That's the water we're swimming in, very American term, but that is the system of capitalism, of this idea of we are only worthy of rest, of love, of care, of money, of success if we are productive. And so what that can create in a lot of our brains is I've never done enough, I'm not doing enough. We're outsourcing our worth to, the nameless, faceless teacher grading us, which is a whole thing to unpack. But I will say that what can we do to help us fall asleep is I have these affirmations I say, and my partner, he has different affirmations say, but basically it's affirming, like, I've done enough. I'm ready to fall asleep. I deserve rest. And what has been done today is enough. And I trust that whatever I've completed, whatever I've done, even if, you're on your cycle or you're ill and you had to lay in bed all day, that is enough. That you had to take a sick day or whatever, it is all enough. And there's something about breath and speaking that can allow your nervous system to say, okay. Because truly, sleep is productive too. Sleep is what nourishes us. It literally feeds our cells so that we can keep going. It's to keep us alive, if you think about it from this like primitive standpoint. So so in summary, make your bedroom a temple. Try to get the screens out, which is hard, but very helpful. And some sort of affirmation before you go to sleep to really remind yourself that I used to light a candle and say out loud, back when I was working a lot before I had a child, everything I did that day, to remind, because sometimes you think, what did I even do today? And say, like, oh, I had that meeting and I responded to that email and I paid that bill and I took a walk and I ate lunch. Just remind yourself, I've done enough and it's time to rest.
Right, because so many things go in parallel that you even forget, like, because it was so packed, what went on in this day.
Oh yeah, you have the amnesia, like, what did I do?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and you just mentioned that we all have these ideas of work, of productivity, of home office also, how it is supposed to be. Maybe you can give other examples how you would challenge that.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit of a rebellious being by nature. After many, many years of trying to follow the rules, I actually followed the rules very well I was quite successful. I'm doing the quotes because I didn't feel good, actually. So I just remember at my marketing job being rewarded in the company and really feeling like, okay, I have everything on paper, but like it was hard for me to dress myself every day. I had a little bit of depression. I wasn't moving my body. I wasn't sleeping well. I was very addicted. I drank a lot of alcohol. You know, there was a lot of ways in which my body was showing me that, like, you're not actually thriving. And so, what can we do in these spaces to push against what we think we're supposed to do so that we can actually be sustainably thriving and help? You know, I just think this new world is emerging. We're seeing it in the way that we're working is shifting, and we're seeing that in the way the climate is changing. We're seeing that in the way, you know, certain structures are crumbling, certain structures are coming up, and we're here and we're alive to be a part of it. So I think it's really important to ask ourselves, like, what isn't working? I can tell you that what isn't working is to expect yourself to be working 8 hours in a row. It's 8 hours here, at least. It's more than 8 hours here. You know, it's like, it's this idea that we as human beings can have peak, like highly caffeinated energy all throughout the day. When you and I both know that, especially if you're a human being who has cycles throughout a month, when we live in climates that have different seasons, where the sun, there's like more sun during some seasons and there's less sun, that impacts us. So why would we punish ourselves or think that we are not doing good enough when we're naturally responding to our seasonal and cyclical nature? So I push back on this belief that we need to be always running at the same state, because we're not robots. We're not robots. We are human beings. We are breathing animals. We are animals. And so I know not all of us can like quit our jobs and run to live in the forest. I'm not doing that, you know? So what can we do? This is why I wrote the book, is for us to remember that our nervous systems, our bodies were designed for a very different world, a slower pace. I call it earth pace. If you think about earth pace, is it the pace of your email inbox? Not at all. It's probably way, way slower. So I do certain things to push back gently and model for other people, like, is this a reasonable expectation? One of them is, I put in my email signature, like, I will not respond to you day of. I practice a slower lifestyle. Like, there's a saying, your urgency is not my emergency. Of course, if something is truly urgent, I will of course respond, but I only have so much energy in my body. You know, so many of us have our jobs, but what do we have? Families, we have our health, we have so many other things that we need to have resources for in our bodies. We only have so much fuel in the tank. And so if I can gently have, like, I have seen some people say, I only check my email once a day at 10 a.m. If you have emailed me after 10 a.m., I will respond tomorrow. There are ways, I love that. There are other people I know who have autoresponders on their email. Email's a great way to model this. Say, hi, I'm a mother, and I have a business, and I'm also the primary parent. So I work intermittently, and I also bake cookies for my kid, and sometimes my kid is sick, and sometimes school is out, and so I will respond to you when I can. And if it's really, really urgent, think about if it really is, and then respond to me. There's also like maybe working. Okay, this is what I mean by that. So I know that you are talking to me right now in the evening, Amelia, and I don't know when, because I'm in California in the States and you're in Berlin. And I wonder for you, like, do you have energy in the evening, or do you have more energy in the morning? Like, I used to work a lot between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. because I had natural energy then, and I was really slow in the mornings. Now, I know sometimes we have to take meetings, but what if we could make our work hours different? You know, now I really have to start work around 9 in the morning, and I'm done at 4. I'm done. And so how can we, again, I understand there are certain restraints in certain organizations, and I know I'm speaking to one specific organization, but are there ways we can encourage the leadership in our organizations, and can we model to do things differently? You know, re-implement the siesta, do something in which we can show that we are not robots and we can still get the work done. But burnout is at an all-time high. I mean, there was the great quitting. I mean, 40% of the workforce, at least here, quit last year.
Yeah,
There is
great recession.
the great, or the great walkout or something like that, where that just made me think like, okay, we're showing through all of these ways that this is not working. And so we're willing to make it work, but we need to do it in new ways that honor our bodies. I mean, the whole 9 to 5 work structure was built on industrial factory economies, where literally in the industrial revolution around, the industrialized Western world, that's what kept the economy humming, was literally how many things you could make in an hour, how many widgets you could put together, how many, cars you could paint or whatever it is. And we're just not in that world anymore. Yes, factories still exist, but I don't think it's fair for us to treat ourselves like factory machines. I think we need to think about new ways of doing it.
Right. I mean, from society's perspective, normally, like, also our bodies are more like something we want to improve, we want to tame, maybe instrumentalize somehow, more seen as a burden. And I know also that you have this concept of rewilding our bodies. So maybe you can tell us a little bit what would be the benefit of rewilding. And I get already some of these benefits, but how does it look like rewilding our bodies?
Beautiful segue. Rewilding. So what a term. I wonder what each of you listening thinks about it. What comes up for you? Does it make you feel a little nervous? Or does it make you feel excited? Or does it make you feel like vulnerable in private? This term rewilding, I have to honor, there's a wonderful book out there called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Very famous and beautiful book, storytelling. I actually highly recommend you listen to her read the book. This concept that I talked about at the beginning, how we come from the earth. This is not some woo-woo weird hippie thing. It's just true. We come from the earth, and we can see it in the ways our bodies respond to sunlight and darkness. We can see it in the way those of us that have cycles, we can see it the way every month or so we cycle. We can see it in our responses to, I don't know about you, but when the moon is full, I can't sleep. You can see the ways in which we as human beings are connected to the wild. So this whole concept I'm talking about of rebelling against the system that treats us like machines is what I would call rewilding, remembering our wild nature. And so again, how can we integrate our wildness into modern society, modern life? This is my deep interest. And I know that it looks different for every human being, and it looks different for every organization. But maybe it means howling at the moon during meetings, but I'm wondering if people are thinking that, but I think it more is about honoring what is naturally moving through you. Like, can we make more space for our emotional range? Can we make it okay to cry and grieve, which is a very natural and important part of being human? And I know that so many of us over the last few years have felt deep grief for so many things that have happened or been lost, or humans who have lost. And I just see a culture that doesn't allow grief. And the results of that are trauma, not having spaces where we can process that. And we need that. That's a very natural and important part of being human and in community. Can we allow ourselves to take days to rest when our bodies really need it? Can we remember that we belong to each other, even though we are all, the sort of default successful way of being is to do life alone. Like, I live in my nice apartment alone and I'm successful and I don't rely on anyone. because that's somehow a weakness. But human beings are communal by nature. We felt that more than ever in the last 2.5 years, right? The separation. This is there are many great thinkers, one of which is George Monbiot, who's an environmental activist, calling this time the age of loneliness. I don't know about you, but when I heard that, I was like, wow, that feels really true. We're more technologically connected than ever before. We can just message each other on so many platforms. It's beautiful in a way. And yet, why is there such a sharp rise in anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation? It's certainly true for me. My mental health deeply suffered in lockdown. And so what happened is what happened. What's happening is what's happening. But to remember that we need each other. Our nervous systems, our heart, our organs need each other in order to, this term co-regulate, for our nervous systems to come back down to stasis, for us to feel clear, for us to feel grounded, for us to feel creative, for us to be collaborative. And so many of us have lost that, not just because of lockdown, but because we have a culture of individualism, which is go it alone, and that's how success is made. Crush the competition. But to rewild is to remember that we are communal creatures. So this term is pretty wide in its definition. And I like that because each of us has a resonance. Like there's something that's coming up in each of you listening that's like, this is what's important to me in my rewilding journey. This is what is like pinging, calling out to me right now. And for some people, it's like, I want to feel more community. And for some people, it's like, I want to rest more. And for other people, it's like, oh, I want to get more in touch with like, my inner wolf woman. For other people, it's like, I want to change the way we work to be more collaborative. There's just so many ways to do it.
Right. And in your book, Root and Ritual, you also have a passage where you say, when we isolate, we don't reach out anymore for help. We don't share. And in this moment, we might miss that other peoples are also struggling, and we miss this point of connection actually and community. And I was wondering if you're a very shy and introverted person, how do you do this in the work context?
Yes. So I actually get this question a lot from introverts who are like, but I really struggle. I really struggle with vulnerability. I really struggle with energy management. Yeah. And in work settings, that can be really hard. I think a lot of it has to do with the work culture. It can be hard to feel safe, psychologically safe to share in that way if the work culture really doesn't allow for that. So I think it does start with leadership. I personally think women in leadership is very important. Not that men can't be empathetic, but it's patriarchy and toxic masculinity is a very prevalent thing in leadership across the board. And I think that small little ways are really important. So I give these little tools in the book to sort of help us with deeper connection. It doesn't have to be starting with, let me share my pain. That's pretty, you need to consent to that. It needs to feel right. But there are ways in which we need to look up from our desks or, from our Zooms or whatever and see each other. And so the first one I always say is compliment. Give a genuine compliment to someone you see. There's something just like, there's a chemical like dopamine response in what happens to us when we see each other and when we help each other. I used to run every holiday season, I used to do something called the Gratitude Project or the Gratitude Experiment. And it was all about how there were these studies coming out, this was like 10 years ago, about how when we help someone or we benefit someone's life in some way, like the hormonal response is like catastrophic, like not catastrophic, sorry, is very extreme in the system. And for so many of us at the holiday season, like we're getting depressed and crashing because there's less sunlight, less vitamin D. And so I think this can be applied year round, obviously, that like it can start with like, I like your coffee mug. Where did you get it? Or, wow, those glasses are really chic. Like, Or thank you for the way you said that. That really impacted me, a genuine compliment, not like nice shirt, when you don't care about their shirt. But going even deeper, like if you hear someone say like, oh, I'm sorry, I just like had a really rough weekend, being like, I heard you say that. Like, what do you mean? Is there a way I can help? Is there a way I can support you? That for like very obviously it's helpful and altruistic to people you support, but also from a selfish perspective, it reminds us, right, that we matter, that we can make an impact. There's like this niggling story that can happen when we're isolated, which is what you shared from my book, which is like, I don't matter. I am awkward. No one cares about me. They're judging me. There's no way I can move past this. These are the lies. These are the lies of shame that can surround us, that are just can be eliminated through a simple thing as like, how was your weekend? And then actually not just like, people say, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm not saying that where it's just pleasantries. I'm saying taking 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to say, hey, observe something, ask how they're doing, and then respond meaningfully. And then it's like a muscle. So many of us have an atrophied muscle of connection, particularly after, the pandemic experience, but it builds over time so that actually you become a better listener, become a better friend, even if you're an introvert and you need your space afterwards.
Right. That's lived values, and at the end, the culture of a company.
Yes.
Yeah. And on this topic, I know that on another topic, actually, your topic of belonging and belonging to ancestors. You also say there that belonging to our ancestors is an experience of the senses. And maybe you can explain what you mean by that. And when I heard it, the first thing was for me also, oh, maybe we can use that also in other contexts, because it seems like we can learn better through that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So we belong to our ancestors. What do I mean by that? So I mean, each of us, every human being here and on the replay, time traveling to be with us right now, comes from millions and billions. So you think about two parents, and then they had two parents, and think about this tree that just widens. We come from so many human beings that came before us. No matter what you think about them, if they were cool or not cool, harmful or not harmful, they existed. So you exist now. And then if you go beyond that, we exist from the animals that became before them, apes and chimps and things like that. And then before that, like what was before that? And then at some point, we were stars. I know this sounds pretty wild, but think about just like the history of creation, right? Our ancestors are trees, our ancestors are stars, are matter. So I say this because some people have a hard time relating to ancestors as like relatives and genealogy. That can feel a little tough, especially if you're adopted or you aren't on good terms with family. So your family, your ancestors, it's just a wide web. Think about a beautiful spider web glistening with dew of all of these beings that you come from. And why I think it's important to remember that is because of this whole myth of loneliness that a lot of us are living through now, of believing that we are alone, that no one cares, that life could be meaningless. That's a pretty extreme thing, but right, that's this whole individualist mindset makes us go into a space of feeling deeply alone. But we are never alone, and we come from a huge family. So how do we connect to that feeling? Some of us can go on the internet, take the spit test, take the blood test, and be like, oh, these are the lands my people come from. These are my ancestors' names, my great grandfather, blah, blah, blah. I'm actually talking about something so much deeper than that. I'm talking about cooking. I'm talking about making foods. That's an ancestral experience of just stirring the soup. Maybe it's your great grandfather's recipe, or maybe it's, maybe you have ancestors from Italy and it's like an old Italian recipe, or maybe just the act of gathering around a table and eating with friends, with loved ones, with colleagues. That is something our ancestors have always done to nourish themselves, to stay alive, to get through hard moments. And that can be comforting to us in the hard moments, to remember that this is something that we can connect to. I'm talking about music. I'm talking about dress. I'm talking about art, folk art. I'm talking about the ways in which we as humanity and all that came before us expressed ourselves, connected to each other. And I think a lot of us in these times forget that that is a way we can be in this world, that our work is our art, that our food is our expression of who we are and all that we come from, and that we are going to become ancestors too. We are ancestors in the making, and all that we create and do is ancestral artifact, so that our descendants, whether they are of our bodies or of the ripple effect of who we are, the legacy of who we are, can connect to it and look back. I always think about like our social media feeds and our Instagram posts and our Twitter and LinkedIn posts, and how that's an ancestral artifact. And like, who knows who will interact with those 100 years from now, 200 years from now? What will they think of this time? There is a way that connecting to an ancestral mindset helps us see like the long term of like why we're here on earth, you know, the impact we make. And so we can think back millennia and we can think forward millennia. And I think when we can do that, our life can have more meaning. Our everyday interactions with each other can become more meaningful. The way we take care of ourselves has the future and the past in mind. And that's the root of my work. And it can sound deeply spiritual because it is. It's a way that we can connect to so much more than just ourselves in this moment.
Right. What would you say to somebody who has the argument, if I see myself as a part of a big thing, if I look about my ancestors and the universe and what I was created from, I feel even more lonely. And I feel like I have to matter somehow, but I don't do something meaningful, for example. And what would you say to this person? I know that you have very good arguments for that, but just for people who have maybe this perspective.
Yeah, no, I've felt that before. I've felt that looking up at the night sky. Like I've felt that, you know? Yeah, I have a lot of compassion for that feeling. And I think it's natural to go there in this time that we're in. And I'd say there are moments in our lives where we get little peeks into what I would say is our innate way of being. It's the moment when everyone laughs at a joke and you feel that sense of belonging. It's that moment when you're listening to a beautiful concert and everyone is just, you know, like their hearts are throbbing to the music and you feel that sense of, I'd say, community, fellowship. There are these little, even if it's online, when you have a community where everyone has an affinity for some game, some hobby, some niche show or movie, there's that feeling that like, oh, here I have this sense of a tribe, I have this sense of a clan. So no matter who you are, there are moments in time where you get those little like morsels that remind you. And I'd say lean into those. Lean into those. I mean, if you feel alone, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, it's not like you haven't figured out this life yet. It's actually pretty natural response to the times we are living in. And it does take effort. It does take effort to shift that feeling. And so I'm here to remind you that that feeling doesn't have to be the way life is, you know, and that lean into spaces and feelings and make space in your life to connect to something deeper and wider. And I think it does start with simple things like, what do I need in my body, in my like emotions, in my psychology to feel better now? And then from there, that builds strength to be like, how can I feel a deeper sense of connection to a community, no matter what it is, a sense of family, whether it's chosen or by blood? How can I feel this wider web of connection that is, you know, that is literally the tree roots beneath the concrete in cities that is literally like the mycelium mushroom holding together this planet. That is the way of nature, and we are a part of that.
Beautiful. In your podcast Belonging, you also share very personal struggles and learnings from yourself. And you just mentioned it was different, like it's a journey also for you when you had some feelings of loneliness and how you cope with them now. How would you say did this change you, podcasting and sharing so much from your life?
Yeah, the podcast for me is a way to be witnessed. So I think it's really important for us to be seen and witnessed, which can feel very vulnerable, but after a while can feel really good. In our truth, so many of us are hiding or feeling like no one would understand if they really knew, or they may judge me. And it's very healing to say, here's the truth. And for people to say, oh, wow, I hear you, or I understand, or I'm so sorry that happened. And thank you for sharing that with me. I'm so grateful to know that now about you. And so the podcast, in this age of loneliness, in this time of isolation, you know, I live in a home with my partner and my daughter. It's a way for me to connect with a wider net of community and say, here's what's going on for me. And then to get emails and Instagram comments and people saying like, oh, actually, I went through that too. Wow, I thought I was the only one. And for me to say, I thought I was the only one, it feels so good. And it again reminds us that we are never alone. So that's why I'm always an open book. You said before we recorded, like anything we shouldn't talk about. I'm like, no, definitely not. Like I will share. And of course, you know, the culture of my company of one person makes that safe, you know, so I always have to give a caveat that I understand there are some spaces where you have to use discernment, but I want to encourage all of us to find spaces, friends, communities, colleagues, where you can say like, you know, I'm actually really struggling right now, or, you know, I just lost a loved one, or I'm not feeling well. And for people to say, oh, wow, thank you for telling me. I see you, I hear you.
Yeah. The pandemic seems to be like a point where things like that changed. I feel like mental health and topics like that are more important now for companies.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to take that, right? To also, I know there are bad consequences as we just talked about, but there are also good consequences out of it. And I think that people share more due to it, or at least I can see that in my company. But it's more like in this direction that we can even share more. And I think very, very nice, this development.
I'm thrilled about that. I'm really thrilled about that. It's obviously took kind of an intense and desperate moment, but often that's what catalyzes change in organizations. And I think, yeah, the organizations that will last. I mean, again, we talked about the great walkout. Like, I think employees, human beings, require an understanding about mental health from their employer now, that maybe they in previous decades was just ignored, and that had an impact, that had a negative impact. So I feel excited about that.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to ask you the question, what your life lessons are.
Yeah, I truly believe that the way we're going to respond to the urgent needs of our times is actually to live life in a slower way. I am noticing that the more I slow down, the less urgent I am, the more strength and resilience it gives me as a human being to be aware and responsive to what these times require of us. So I would burn out so much from being so reactive, and that really came from a traumatized nervous system. You know, also a system that wants us to move fast, right? So I think the most radical act and the most nourishing act we can do is live a slower life. Like I'm saying, respond to emails slower, eat slower, like move slower in our lives, respond to each other with more care. I don't mean like walking in slow motion, although sometimes I think that could be helpful too, but I mean really giving ourselves more space to consider everything. I have like a rule that every time a request is made of me, I require 24 hours before responding. I even tell people, like, I feel like I'm a yes, but I'm going to sleep on it because that's what I require. And often it shifts everything. Like, what if we could actually do that? I think it would create less harm in the world if we could move slowly in these ways. So that's a big lesson for me. And yeah, the other one is really that we are innately communal creatures, and yet it can be very, very hard for us to be in healthy community and relationship with each other, because there's a lot of ways in which that has been undone over the last several generations, you know, to make meaningful friendships that are toxic, to trust each other when we have differing views. I don't know how it is in Europe, but the pandemic really created a lot of division in our communities around COVID, around the vaccine, around politics. You know, we had a really divisive president for a few years, and I noticed how it made it so we felt scared of trusting each other and navigating difference. And I think the only way we can respond to moments of crisis or respond to moments of change is if we can communicate beyond difference to a space of like being able to function and being able to support each other, to remember our humanity. Before we hit record, we were talking about how here in California in the United States, we have really, really bad wildfires now every late summer, early autumn, like really devastating. And I always think, like, if a fire hits my neighborhood and we have to evacuate, am I going to care about the politics of my neighbor, or am I going to help them get out and run? You know, and so this can be a hard one too, because a lot of times the topics we're talking about, we feel deeply passionate about and do feel like life or death. And I honor that. I'm not bypassing that. I feel the same way. But I do think we need to transcend that and really lean into our discomfort. I would even say our emotional immaturity around navigating conflict. I feel emotionally immature around navigating conflict, and I'm passionate about it. And so life lesson there is just like, lean into it. Don't run. Even just say, I'm really uncomfortable right now, and stay. So those are the two: slowing down and staying in the discomfort of conflict. They feel really important to me.
If you say slowing down, I feel the discomfort. It feels like scary. And that's exactly where we want to go, to challenge us positively, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And find tools to get through that discomfort, not just sit there and, you know, shake. But yeah, I'm with you. I also struggle with slowing down. It's like we teach what we need to learn. Every day I'm in the practice, the devotional practice of like, oh, what's coming up for me with this? Okay, let's figure. Even just like when I eat fast, I'm like, why am I eating fast? Why am I scared of eating slow? And just navigating that, you know, with love, with compassion for myself.
Thank you so much for sharing this advice with us. Thank you, really, all of the insights that you gave us through the interview. And when people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my name is Becca Piastrelli. It's an Italian last name, but usually if you type in some version of that, the computer robots find me. So I don't try to stress about it. And I have a podcast called Belonging with Becca Piastrelli. And I'd say, yeah, if you want to hear more of what I'm talking about and connect with me in any way, you can find me there on my website.
So follow Becca on her website, listen to the podcast, the Belonging podcast, buy the beautifully illustrated book, Root and Ritual.
Yes, thank you.
Having said that, until next time, keep learning.
Thank you.
Bye bye.